Hello, and welcome to week 24 of the cellblock Scorch. This is Rocket Man again. I am reading once again for Lost. She is still lost. Last week, the winner of the Scorch was Cricket, and her prompt was she had oil paint in her veins. Lost did not title this piece. She just used the prompt and started writing. So here we go. This was the hardest commission she'd had yet. She should have just said no, but the payout was too good to pass up, and she knew that her client needed this painting. Alice's oil paintings were famous, and the upper class were always clawing for a way to get her to paint for them. Her paintings were so sought after because she captured life so realistically, but what made her painting truly unique was the coloration. Her colors were vibrant and unnatural. Others tried to paint in a similar style with colors that didn't fit where they were, but they never came close to her work. Alice had been working on this commission for 2.5 months. Her works of the same size usually took about 2.5 weeks. This one was taking her so much longer to complete because her patron, Marcus Lettel, refused to accept her process. He wanted her to use specific colors, which wasn't how she normally worked. Alice used whatever color came to her, and trying to get specific colors was hard. She reminisced over the difficulty of working with Mr. Lettel as she set out her tools to start painting. She hoped she would be able to finish the painting today, because she only had one shade of green left to add to the canvas. She stared at the painting of Mrs. Lettel, focusing on what she was missing. Mrs. Lettel almost looked like she was amused by what someone had just said to her. Her body was relaxed, yet poised, and the corners of her mouth were turned up in a loving smirk, but her eyes were missing color and emotion. Now all she had to do was produce emerald green. Alice looked around one last time to check all the curtains were drawn, but the door was locked before she picked up a knife and made a small cut in her left forearm. She held her breath as she watched a deep crimson well up where the cut was. She let out a defeated sigh and reached over to the bandage on the table. She wrapped her cut, cleaned off her knife, and looked at her left leg for a place that didn't already have a bandage. She found a place on the outside of her ankle, and once again made a small cut. She hoped that this would be it, but as she watched, she saw imperial purple run down her leg into the bandage below. She repeated her process from earlier, and then she looked to her right leg. There was no room there, and there was also no more room on her torso. As much as she hated having to use her right arm, it was the last place for her to try today. Gripping her knife one more time, she found a clear spot on her shoulder. When the knife bit into her skin, she looked away, too scared to see what the result would be. After what seemed like forever, she looked back to her shoulder, where she saw the most wonderful thing. Emerald green paint was oozing from the wound. Alice had to act fast as she picked up her finest brush in her left hand, dipped it into the emerald green. She took one last look at the colorless eyes as she switched her brush to her right hand, lifted her arm to the canvas, ignoring the slight throbbing in her shoulder. When Alice finished the eyes, she looked over the rest of the painting. There were still a few places where she needed to add emerald green, but she needed more paint. Alice picked up her knife again, placed a second cut on top of her forearm by her elbow. From this cut, she had enough paint to finally finish. Once she finished, she checked to make sure no green paint was seeping through the bandages. She stepped across the room to look at her newest masterpiece. She'd been unsure how the portrait with only shades of green would turn out, but it was beautiful. Every shade complemented the ones it was by, and no detail was lost in the sea of green. She wasn't sure when she started crying, but she knew she couldn't stop herself. When the tears finally stopped falling, she realized how exhausted she was. She also realized how badly beat up her body was from all the cuts she'd had to make to get all the magnificent greens now gleaming on the canvas. Alice just wanted to crawl into bed. She stopped herself from thinking such foolish thoughts as she started to clean her brushes. She set her used brushes out to dry. She put everything else away, making certain that her knife was out of sight before she opened the drapes. When her studio was in order, she headed to bed. She would call Mr. Little tomorrow and tell him that the portrait was finally finished.
Hi everyone, it's Cricket here for Judge Comments. I really loved the piece Lost wrote this week. I thought it was so interesting. It was like such a mystery. I loved the way that the artist described her process, and I was like, oh, she paints with the vibe. She just uses whatever color comes to her. And then it was like so literal. It was like, oh no, the color that comes to her. And I think when I gave this prompt, I wasn't expecting such a literal take on it. But both Pacey and Lost actually did something that ended up being pretty literal, which surprised me. But like, I think Lost really just got me with kind of like the twist at the end. And then I thought it was really interesting to see how much painting the way she does and doing what she did took like such a actual physical toll on her. I really like that that was addressed. It just felt really fleshed out and really well done. Basically, I just thought this piece was very cool, and I hope y'all enjoyed.
So, as the winner of this week's Scorch, Lost prompted the following week, and her prompt that you will hear in 25 is She'd Never Seen Light Look Quite So Dark. Have a good day and keep those fires burning.
The Cellblock Scorch is a production of Stellacore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. We can be reached at thestellacore@gmail.com, through comments on your podcast platform of choice, our Instagram, Stella_core, and at our YouTube, also called Stellacore. Feel free to check out our other productions on our YouTube channel or our cosplays on Instagram. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon, linked in the show notes. There, you can access the winning Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month to gain access to all of the Scorch submissions.